Hi everybody, I'm Celeste. Welcome to my booktube channel, A Reader's Almanac with Celeste. And today I am going to be trying the recently viral 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 challenge. Except instead of doing the challenge with books in general, I'm going to be doing different editions of the challenge based on genre. And today, for the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 challenge, I'm going to be calling it the Mostly Vintage Children's Witchy Books Edition. Let's go. So first up, what are 5 favorite books that I will always recommend? Books that have taken up space in my mind and in my memory, that live there rent-free, which I love and will always recommend either for sentimental value or because it's just a wonderful story. First up, I've chosen a book which is a perennial favorite of Cozy Booktube, and that is Mary Stewart's The Little Broomstick. And this is a book that Mary Stewart published in 1971. It is the story of a little girl. She's lonely and she has to spend her holidays with an old aunt in the country. And it doesn't seem like very much is happening. She's kind of bored there. She doesn't know what to do with her time. She doesn't really want to be there. But then she finds a strange black cat and also a flying broomstick, and the adventures ensue from there. Now, there's also, if I recall correctly, some kind of an academy or boarding school in this, so that is also fun. And so, yeah, this is a lovely edition of this book, and the artwork in here is actually done by the wonderful, wonderful Shirley Hughes. I love the illustrator Shirley Hughes. Look at this cover, first of all. Look at the back. I'm going to have to talk more about Shirley Hughes on my channel because I adore her books, and I don't think I've ever featured one before, to be quite honest. So this will be the first. And yeah, this is a lovely, lovely story. Now, what you may not know is that a sub company, like a baby company of Studio Ghibli, you know, of sort of Howl's Moving Castle fame and so many other wonderful animated anime films, a sub-company of theirs took this story and made a film called Mary and the Witch's Flower. And it's very strange, but I think it's worth watching. And there are differences between the book and the anime movie, but I think they're both really neat to watch and sort of compare with each other and contrast. So yeah, The Little Broomstick by Mary Stewart. The next book that I would like to recommend to you is very beat up. It's missing its dust jacket and it's full of chocolate fingerprints. That tells you how beloved it is and how many times it's been read in our family. That is The Witch Family by Eleonor Estes. And I really must get a new edition to add to my shelves. This one is quite beat up, but quite loved. And you know, you probably know Eleonor Estes from books like The Moffats and Ginger Pie and lots of others. But this is her story, The Witch Family. Now, because this book is so beat up and you can't see the dust jacket, I am going to put an image of one right here so that you can see it, because the artwork on it is gorgeous. And the illustrations for this book were done by Edward Ardizzone, and his illustrations are absolutely fabulous. There's an example of one. I think that's just perfect for autumn. This is the story of 2 little girls, Amy and Clarissa. Amy and Clarissa are probably like around 7 years old, and they've heard many stories about this witch. And when they hear these stories about this witch, she's always causing mischief. And so the two little girls, named Amy and Clarissa, decide to pretend their own story about what happens to this naughty witch. And what they do is they banish her to a bare glass hill, and she's going to live in this haunted house on the glass hill. And she is only allowed to fly around the mountain and do the hurly-burly on Halloween night. And on Halloween night, if she's very good for the whole rest of the year, on Halloween night, she can not only fly around the hill, but she can also go down the hill. And so this is a very, and in this illustration, you see them drawing pictures of the glass hill where they're putting her on the mountain. And so it's kind of like Harold and the Purple Crayon in one sense, because what they're drawing becomes the story of the witch. And the thing that is so marvelous about this story of the witch on the bare glass mountain is that we then meet the witch, and there is correspondence that goes back and forth, letters that go from the two little girls to the witch, and all kinds of things start happening in the story. It's just so imaginative, so delightful, and yeah, I don't believe it takes place in the autumn. I think it might take place in the spring, but suffice it to say, we start to find more little witches and just lots of interesting adventures. So it's a really beloved story. It has beautiful illustrations. Some copies of this go for literally hundreds of dollars. Yeah, this is an original edition, and it is from the 1960s, I believe, 1950s, 1960s. Definitely beat up, but will always be in my heart. The third book, which is on the list of books I will always recommend, is White Witch of Kynance, and this is by the author Mary Calhoun. First of all, this has absolutely gorgeous cover art. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the ring light, but let me see if I can hold it up here for you. I mean, I just absolutely love this. And this takes place, it's historical fiction, it takes place in the 16th century along the Cornish coast. And there is a young woman named Janet, and Janet meets a local healing woman who is also believed to be a witch. Her name is Ann Margate, and she wants to learn her healing magic and learn the secrets of good and evil. And this is a story of upheaval at a very tumultuous time in history, and it really does such a great evocative job of capturing the atmosphere that you would think you would see on the Cornish coast in the 16th century, in the 1500s. And it's a story of different belief systems and people accusing each other of things and how rifts and divides can be healed. It was published by Harper and Row in 1970. So yeah, White Witch of Kynance. The next book on this list, which I will always recommend, is Broom-Adelaide, written and illustrated by Barbara C. Freeman. Barbara C. Freeman was an illustrator. She was an author, particularly of fairy tales in the 1960s, and she loved incorporating fantasy and history into her works. This is a fantasy story. I remember it being kind of a crazy story, but it's kind of like madcap, whirlwind, witches. It's a girl called Broom-Adelaide. Her father is the emperor of a place called the Little Empire. I know that there's a wicked governess in it. I know that there is an old drafty castle, and I know that there is a talking fox. I do remember those three things. Other than that, I'm really due for a reread, but I do remember the impression and the feeling of wonder that it left me with. I just want to show you the illustration on the back cover here, and then also inside here, just to give you an idea of Barbara Freeman's work. And this is from a chapter called Breakfast in the Snow. Isn't that lovely? There's that. So, yeah, Broom-Adelaide, Barbara C. Freeman. The fifth book on the list of 5 favorite books that I will always recommend is an anthology, and I don't have a physical copy of it at the moment. I would love to get a copy of it, but that is called Witches, and it's by Ann Losa. And this is an anthology about all different kinds of witches through poems, stories, folk tales, fairy tales, and good and evil witches who cackle their way through a haunting collection. It's just such a fun anthology. I love the artwork on it, and I would really like to get a physical hardcover copy for my shelves. Next up in the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 challenge, 4 books in my TBR that I would like to get to soon or have a reread of soon. And for several of these, I don't actually have a hardcover physical copy of the book, but I will post some pictures of the book covers up here so you can see what they look like. And the first is called Carbonel. Carbonel is by a very prolific children's book author and editor from the 1960s, and her name is Barbara Sleigh. While I don't have a physical copy of Carbonel, I do have several books that were edited or written by Barbara Sleigh. I'll hold up one of them for you here. It is called West of Widdershins, and this is Original Tales by Barbara Sleigh. There's the back cover there. And I'll just show you the front material here to give you an idea of the sort of books that she produced. Isn't that so pretty? The illustrator in this case is Victor Ambras, who is also on the archaeology show Time Team and does the illustrations for that show, by the way. I also have a copy of a book by Barbara Sleigh called North of Nowhere, which is another short story, fairy tale, folktale anthology. Anyway, Carbonel is based on an old folk tale from the British Isles called The King of the Cats, and in it a little girl named Rosemary goes to the marketplace and buys a cat and a broom from an elderly little old lady who's in the marketplace, and her name is Mrs. Cantrip. Little does Rosemary know that the broom is enchanted. They're magic items. The cat starts talking to her, the broom starts doing things, and then she realizes that Mrs. Cantrip is a witch who is actually trying to retire and move on to a new career. So this is just a delightful tale. It's full of whimsy and wonder. Mrs. Cantrip is a witch in the best, most endearing way possible. She's lovely, and it's just such a wonderful classic story. Another wonderful book is called Dorrie, and that is by Patricia Coombs. Dorrie actually has a series of adventures over the course of probably 20 books, and the illustrations are just so memorable, so classic, so wonderful. Dorrie is a little witch whose hat is always on crooked. Her stockings never match. She has a black cat named Gink who follows her wherever she goes, and she lives with her mother, who is called the Big Witch, and their house hand Cook. And she's always getting into mischief and trouble, and each book is just so delightful. The first one in the series is called Dorrie's Magic, and it was first published in 1962 by Patricia Coombs. The next book that I would like to do a reread of that's on my TBR is Little Witch by Anna Elizabeth Bennett. Now this is about a little 9-year-old girl named Minx, and Minx lives with a woman named Madame Snickesney. Madame Snickesney is in fact a witch. She's not a very nice person. She's kind of mean. She bosses Minx around, and every night she leaves Minx at home alone while she goes out and rides her broom. Minx has to stay home and come up with potions and spells. And Minx experiments with different potions to see what will happen. kitchen. And while she's doing that, she always looks in the mirror, because sometimes when she looks in the mirror, when she's making her potions, behind her she sees this image of a beautiful woman, and she wants to find out who that is. The story goes on from there, but this is just such a wonderful classic. Years ago it had already reached, I believe, its 60th anniversary. So yeah, it is just a marvelous book, and one that I would really like to do a reread of soon. Another book that I'm delighted to share with you is The Widow's Broom by the fantastic illustrator Chris Van Allensburg. Chris Van Allensburg has written so many and illustrated so many wonderful books. The illustrations in here are just so quintessentially autumn and so spooky, and just so perfect for the spooky season. I'll just share a couple with you here. I mean, they're phenomenal. And this is about a woman, an elderly woman. Her name is Minna Shaw, and her neighbors don't trust the clever new broom that has come into Minna Shaw's possession. And they sort of talk about her behind her back. Here's Minna out in her field and her garden. And one day the broom does some real mischief because of two boys who were causing trouble, two of the neighborhood boys, and the broom plays a little trick on them. And that's it. As far as the neighbors are concerned, they have to get rid of the broom. So this is the story of what happens with that broom and to Minna Shaw. Here's another wonderful illustration. It just really, for me, captures that quintessentially kind of New England, puritanical, spooky season feel. I'm not quite sure how else to put it, but The Widow's Broom is just such a delight, and I was actually quite lucky to recently acquire this copy of The Widow's Broom. It's a picture book that I've always wanted, and this was at a library sale on the final day of the sale, and it was one of those deals where if you brought a bag, you could fill up the bag for $5 with however many books you could stuff in the bag, and so this was one of the ones that I very carefully slipped in there. Next up, in the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 challenge, 3 5-star reads. The first book that I want to talk to you about in this category is just quintessential. It's iconic. It's probably the ultimate spooky fall children's vintage witchy book for me, and that is The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Speare. This takes place in the 1680s in New England, and it's about a young lady named Kit Tyler. Kit Tyler sets foot on American soil and finds that she's not very welcome here. And she's living with someone who puts her to very hard work, and her only respite is when she can escape the place she's living and go out to the meadows, where she meets an elderly lady, and it's called The Meadows by Blackbird Pond, and she meets the lonely bent figure of Hannah, regarded by the colonists as, of course, a witch. And of course, in this book there is a witch trial, which is just heart-pounding, page-turning, suspenseful, marvelous. The historical detail, the attention to building atmosphere and menace is incredible. This is probably the penultimate book for this edition of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 challenge. This is the heart book, if you will. The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Speare. The next book that I'd like to share with you, which is a 5-star read, is Thomasina by Paul Gallico. This is another favorite of mine, and it's one I had never read before, so it's a new favorite. I read this book along with several of you a while back for a May Animal Book Challenge, and so yeah, we read Thomasina, we watched the movie, and it was just so delightful, so wonderful. I was afraid it was going to be kind of overly precious and twee. It was not at all. In fact, parts of it are a bit harsh. And so this is the story of a 7-year-old girl named Mary, and Mary has a cat named Thomasina. And Thomasina is not feeling well, and her Mary's father, who happens to be a veterinarian and a very stern and strict man since his wife passed away. He's a veterinarian, and he decides that the cat needs to be euthanized, which absolutely traumatizes Mary and the reader, by the way. And so she decides not to ever speak again. So she stops speaking to her father, and she actually becomes quite ill herself. And also in the story is a reclusive woman who lives in a little cottage in a nearby glen, who heals injured animals who are brought to her. And the reason I'm including this book in this Witchy vintage children's book challenge is because of this character, this woman. She's delightful. She's a healing figure. She portrays witchcraft in the best possible sense. She is in tune with nature. She is a healer. She's in tune with the seasons. She intuits things. She listens to the animals. She observes them quietly to see what's wrong with them. She really opens herself up and listens in order to empathically heal what is around her. And I just love that and think it's just such a beautiful representation of witchcraft. You know, we always have the funny, silly witches with the pointed hats, which are delightful and wonderful. I love those. But this harkens back to an earlier sort of magic, which I love even more. And so yeah, this book is quiet. In some places it's brutal, it's introspective, and it's a marvelous portrayal of a witch in a vintage children's book. Thomasina by Paul Gallico. The next book that I would absolutely recommend, which is a 5-star read, also has no dust jacket, so I will put a picture of one up here in just a moment. But this is my beloved, well-worn, dust jacketless copy of A Choice of Magic by Ruth Manning Sanders. And this is an anthology of fairy tales and folk tales about all kinds of things, all kinds of dragons, goblins, wizards, and witches. And yeah, the illustrations are fantastic. They're done by the wonderful Robin Jacques. I'll just show you the color front piece illustration here. And I really am looking for a good used copy of this book that still has this dust jacket intact, because it's such a wonderful dust jacket. In fact, I remember when I was a little girl, I remember the day the dust jacket ripped. I was pulling it out of my backpack when I got home from school, and it caught on a clipboard. And unfortunately, the cover of this book ripped. I don't know why I had brought this to school. Maybe I was reading it during the lunch hour or something. But in any event, Ruth Manning Sanders has researched and edited so many different wonderful collections of folk and fairy tale material. And recently, I do know that some of these books have been republished and divided up, sort of like this contains stories about everything: dragons, ghosts, goblins, witches, wizards, mermaids, etc., etc., etc. And there is a press, and I think they're sort of like independently published. It looks sort of independently published. It's called Mabs Media, but they have recently republished some of Ruth Manning Sanders' works illustrated by Robin Jacques. I know that recently my friend Heather from Water Bear Reads has displayed a few of them and shared a few of them with you. The particular one that I have for the spooky season is A Book of Witches. And here's a lovely, lovely cover with some of Robin Jacques' artwork. I think my favorite story in this collection is Esben and the Witch, and here is an illustration from that, and that is a story from Denmark that you can find in A Choice of Magic. Next up in the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 challenge, 2 recent reads or recent releases. And so I have a picture book here to share with you for the first of the 2. It is a delightful picture book, and it is called Witch Fairy. This is what the cover of this one looks like. It is adorable. I love the color palette. And so this is by Brigitte Meen, and it's illustrated by Carl Knut. And they are from Flanders. And so this is a picture book which has been translated into English. And so in this world of fairies, fairies are always expected to be neat. They're always expected to be sweet. And there is a little fairy named Rosemary, and she does not want to be a fairy. She wants to be a witch. And so she runs away from home to join the witches in the forest. And the witches don't know what to make of her, and they're sort of spying on her in this illustration. I just love these illustrations. They're so different. They're quirky and they're humorous, but they're also you know, they just have that sort of fey quality. And here's a lovely 2-page spread illustration. And of course, Rosemary's mother is forlorn and worried because Rosemary has run off and she doesn't know where she's gone. So she goes out looking for her in the forest of witches. And she finds her, and they have a good talk, and they come to a truce, an understanding. And so this book has quickly become very dear to me. It's a newer book, actually. And at first, when I read it the first time through, I thought, well, you know, that's a pretty basic, simple story. But then it stayed with me. I've thought about it since then, and it's kind of about belonging and what group you belong to and what your family wants you to do and wants you to be versus individual choice and free will and spreading your wings and learning to do what you want to do and finding out what you're good at. It's about a lot of things for a very, you know, so for a very simple children's book. It's actually, it makes you think, and the illustrations are beautiful. So this is a definite recommendation of a recent read, which I wanted to share with you, Witch Fairy. The other recent release / book I've recently read that I wanted to share with you is Witches, Wizards, and Sorcerers, Myths and Legends. And this is a group of folk tales and fairy tales edited by Jean Menyes. And Jean Menyes has some great recommendations for all things fairy and witchy. And so there are some great tales in here, and Pan Macmillan has come out with an entire series of these books. There's one on sirens and mermaids, which I'm really wanting to get. I'm going to, I think, ask for it for Christmas, and several others as well. And I think my favorite tale so far in here is about Rhiannon. And yeah, that's a wonderful story. Here's the cover art, front and back. So that's the other one. This is just such a delightful little book to tuck into your purse or to leave on your bedside table. And they're just sort of little tiny tales that you can sandwich in between other things that you're reading, and anyone who's interested in fairy tales and folklore will really appreciate this. And finally, in the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 challenge, one book I am currently reading. Well, you know me, I can never limit it to one, but I will limit it to one author, and that is Ruth Chou. Ruth Chou is an American author. She was born in Minnesota, and she was a very popular author when I was a little girl. Her books, it really would not be a scholastic book fair if you didn't walk into the auditorium or the library room or the cafeteria of your school each year and see at least one Witchy Ruth Chou paperback from Scholastic Book Services. And the first one that I ever read by Ruth Chou was The Wednesday Witch, but she has many. So other ones that I have pulled out of my Scholastic Book Club vintage stash of paperbacks that are by Ruth Chou include No Such Thing as a Witch, which is one I would like to get to very soon. And this is about a woman, a next door neighbor. Her name is Maggie Brown, and she has homemade fudge, and you have to beware of Maggie and her fudge. One piece of the fudge makes you love animals. If you eat 2 pieces of fudge, you will understand animal language, and 3 pieces will make you act like an animal. If you eat 4 pieces, help. So of course this is just a little vintage Scholastic book paperback, but Ruth Chou is just so delightful. I also have this one by Ruth Chou, although I think this one is about a sorcerer, if I recall correctly, and that is called The Trouble with Magic, another one that I'd like to get to soon. And I'm going to put a picture of Ruth Chou up here because she's an interesting author of children's books. She actually attended the Corcoran School of Art, and she moved to Manhattan to pursue a career as a fashion artist in the 1940s. And if you look at this picture of her, you will see that she looks like one very fashionable witch herself. I think she's just a fascinating author, a fascinating character. I love that she looked like this and dressed this way and produced so many books that so many school children like myself anticipated with bated breath every year at the Scholastic Book Fair. That is all from me for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I would love to hear what your answers to the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 challenge are, and I will be coming back to you with different iterations or editions of this challenge for different genres, like historical fiction and fantasy books, nonfiction. It's just endless. I will have other ones coming up for you in the future. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I hope you're having a great day, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.